Listen to me closely. There are people who lost access to your life in 2025, but they still have front row seats to your business. They don't pay your bills. They don't carry your burden. They don't fight your battles, yet they have opinions about your pace, your purpose, and your progress. Let me say this slowly so it can sit in your spirit. Everybody does not deserve a response. Everybody does not deserve an explanation. Everybody does not deserve access to you. In 2026, I'm not announcing my moves. I'm not arguing my vision. I'm not explaining my growth, because focus doesn't need applause and purpose doesn't need permission. This is the season where you work in silence and let results make the noise. You didn't come this far to be distracted. You didn't survive what you survived to be divided in your attention. And you definitely didn't step into 2026 to keep proving yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. So today I came with one assignment. Focus on yourself, protect your peace, and stay silent while you build what God promised you. If you're ready to stop talking and start transforming, say amen in your spirit. Let me say this so it reaches the people who have been confusing loudness with strength. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. Some of the strongest moves you will ever make in your life will happen when nobody knows what you're doing. We live in a world that celebrates noise. Post it, announce it, explain it, defend it, justify it. But hear me when I tell you this. Everything valuable does not need a microphone. There are battles you win by speaking up, yes. But there are wars you only survive by shutting down the noise and locking in. Silence is how you preserve energy. Silence is how you sharpen focus. Silence is how you protect vision before it's fully formed. Because let me tell you something about vision. It is fragile in its early stages. You don't plant a seed and dig it up every day just to prove it's growing. You bury it, you water it, you protect it, and you give it time. Some of you have been killing your own progress because you keep exposing it to people who don't know how to handle what you're carrying. Not everybody clapping for you is clapping with you. Some people are clapping so they can count your steps. Some people are clapping so they can study your rhythm. Some people are clapping while secretly hoping you trip. And that's why silence becomes strategy, because when you move in silence, you remove access. You remove unnecessary opinions. You remove premature criticism. You remove sabotage that disguises itself as concern. You don't owe everyone an explanation for why you're tired. You don't owe everyone a breakdown of your next move. You don't owe everyone a response just because they're uncomfortable with your growth. There is a difference between being quiet because you are afraid and being quiet because you are focused. And in 2026, you are not shrinking. You are locking in. Silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you're saying it to the right place. Some of your conversations need to move from people to purpose. Some of your explanations need to turn into execution. Some of your energy needs to stop leaking through arguments that were never meant to be won. Because here's the truth. You can't build and babysit opinions at the same time. Every time you explain yourself, you spend energy. Every time you defend yourself, you delay progress. Every time you argue with someone who already made up their mind, you distract yourself from the assignment. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is alignment. It's choosing peace over proving a point. It's choosing progress over popularity. It's choosing destiny over drama. And let me tell you something else. People get uncomfortable when you go silent, not because you're wrong, but because they've lost control. They were used to your reactions. They were used to your explanations. They were used to pushing buttons and watching you respond. But when you stop responding, when you stop explaining, when you stop announcing, now they don't know where you stand, and that scares them. Silence confuses the enemy. When you move quietly, people can't block what they don't see coming. When you move quietly, jealousy doesn't get a head start. When you move quietly, your confidence stops depending on external validation. And that's growth, because real power doesn't announce itself, it shows up prepared. Some of you are entering a season where your mouth needs to rest so your hands can work, where your voice needs to lower so your vision can rise, where your silence is not emptiness, it is intentional focus. You don't need to post every win. You don't need to vent every frustration. You don't need to explain every delay. Let results speak. Let consistency testify. Let discipline defend you. In 2026, silence will be your shield. Silence will be your filter. Silence will be your advantage. Not because you are hiding, but because you are becoming. And when the time comes to speak, when the moment is right, when the work is done, your results will say everything you never had to explain. So stay quiet, stay focused, and move with intention, because silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Let me tell you something that most people learn too late in life. What you focus on is what you fund. Your attention is not neutral. It is an investment. Wherever your focus goes, your energy follows. Wherever your energy flows, something is growing. Whether you intended it to or not, focus is currency, and the tragedy is not that people don't have potential. The tragedy is that they are spending. They're focused on things that will never pay them back. You wake up with purpose, but you hand your attention to distraction. You wake up with destiny, but you spend your focus on drama. You wake up with vision, but you give your best mental energy to people, problems, and opinions that are bankrupt. And then you wonder why nothing is moving. Focus is not about doing more. It's about deciding what deserves access to your mind. Because everything you give attention to sends you a bill, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Some things are too expensive to keep paying for. You cannot expect growth while constantly entertaining noise. Some of you are exhausted, not because you're doing too much, but because your focus is fractured. You're building with one hand while scrolling with the other. You're praying for elevation while feeding distractions that keep pulling you back down. You're asking for clarity while refusing to disconnect from confusion. Let me say this plainly. Focus is discipline in action. It's waking up and deciding, not today will I react to everything. Not today will I respond to every opinion. Not today will I give free rent in my mind to people who don't belong there, because focus demands sacrifice. You can't focus on everything. That's not strength, that's chaos. Focus means you are willing to disappoint distractions in order to honor your assignment. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most distractions don't look dangerous. They look familiar, they look entertaining, they look urgent. But urgency is not importance. Loud is not valuable, and popular is not productive. Every time you shift your focus away from your purpose, you delay your progress. Every unnecessary argument, every comparison, every emotional reaction is a withdrawal from the account of your destiny. And unlike money, time and focus don't come with refunds. That's why disciplined focus separates achievers from dreamers. Dreamers talk about what they want. Focused people quietly build it. Dreamers wait for motivation. Focused people move even when it's uncomfortable, because focus doesn't care about how you feel. It cares about where you're going. Some of you keep asking for breakthroughs while refusing to break focus. You keep praying for open doors while staring at closed ones. You keep waiting for change while staying locked into habits that no longer serve you. Focus requires you to look forward even when the past is loud. And let me tell you, the world will fight for your attention. Social media will fight for it. Other people's expectations will fight for it. Old versions of you will fight for it, because attention is power, and whoever controls your focus influences your direction. That's why you must guard it aggressively. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not everyone deserves your emotional labor. Not every comment deserves your reply. Some battles are won by refusing to look at them. Focus is saying, I say, it, but I won't stop for it. Focus is saying, I hear the noise, but I won't follow it. Focus is choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term stimulation. And yes, it's lonely sometimes, because focus will separate you from people who live off constant engagement. Focus will make you unavailable to chaos. Focus will make you boring to those addicted to distraction. But let me remind you, boring builds empires. Consistency is not glamorous. Discipline is not loud. Focus rarely gets applause in the moment, but over time, It compounds day by day, choice by choice, habit by habit, and one day people will call it overnight success, not realizing it was paid for with years of protected focus. In 2026, your focus must become intentional, not emotional, not reactive, intentional. You don't need more opportunities. You need less distraction. You don't need more plans. You need more follow through. You don't need more opinions. You need more alignment. Starve what distracts you, feed what develops you, because when focus becomes your currency, you stop spending it on cheap validation and start investing it in lasting transformation. And here's the reward. When your focus sharpens, your confidence grows. When your focus strengthens, your results multiply. When your focus is protected, your purpose accelerates. So guard your attention like your future depends on it, because it does. Let me speak to the part of you that keeps trying to drag everyone into a foot they were never designed to reach. Everyone can go where you're going. And that truth hurts, not because it's cruel, but because it's real. You've been trying to carry people who were only meant to walk with you for a season. You've been explaining your growth to people who are still comfortable where they are. You've been slowing down your obedience so nobody feels left behind. But destiny does not wait for consensus, and purpose does not apologize for progression. Some people are not behind you. They are outgrown, and that doesn't make them bad. It makes them assigned to a different chapter. The problem is not that they can't go. The problem is that you keep trying to make them fit into a version of your life they were never built for. Elevation demands separation. Not because you think you're better, but because the weight of where you're going requires a different capacity. Everybody can't carry this level of responsibility. Everybody can't handle this kind of pressure. Everybody can't survive this kind of discipline. And the moment you start rising, you will notice something. Some people stop celebrating and start tolerating. They smile, but it's forced. They support you, but it's conditional. They cheer for you, but only as long as your growth doesn't confront their stagnation. That's when you have to make a decision. Do I shrink to stay connected, or do I grow and accept the distance? Because distance is not always disloyalty. Sometimes it's protection. Some people only know how to relate to the old you. They're comfortable with the version of you that needed advice, approval, or validation. But when you start walking with clarity, when you stop asking permission, when you start making bold decisions, now your presence makes them uncomfortable. And instead of growing with you, they try to pull you back. Not always with hate, sometimes with guilt. You've changed. You're too serious now. You don't have time anymore. No, you didn't change. You prioritize. Growth costs relationships that were built on convenience. And let me say this clearly, access must match alignment. Just because someone was there in your past does not mean they are required in your future. Some people are good for survival seasons, but not for expansion seasons. They helped you cope, but they can't help you build. They were there when you were healing, but they won't understand when you start leading. And if you're honest, you felt it. Conversations don't flow the same. Values don't align the same. Vision doesn't connect the same. You're talking about discipline, and they're talking about comfort. You're focused on legacy, and they're focused on entertainment. That gap is not arrogance. It's direction. Trying to force everyone to come with you will drain you. You'll find yourself explaining choices that don't need explanation, defending growth that doesn't need defense, justifying discipline to people who resent it. And that's when resentment is born, not because they hate you, but because your growth exposes what they've avoided. Let me tell you something painful, but freeing. Some people are not meant to see the finished version of you. They were there for the construction phase. They saw the mess, they saw the struggle, but they don't get access to the completion, not because you're hiding, but because they don't have the heart to celebrate it. And that's okay. Release them with gratitude, not bitterness. Honor the role they played without trying to rewrite it. Every season has its cast, and not everyone gets a speaking role in the next act. You don't need to announce the separation. You don't need to explain the distance. You don't need to create closure conversations for everyone. Sometimes closure is simply moving forward without them, because where you're going requires faith, not familiarity. It requires courage, not comfort. It requires obedience, not approval. And yes, it gets lonely. Growth often does. But loneliness is better than carrying dead weight into destiny. Silence is better than constant misunderstanding. Peace is better than forced loyalty. Everyone can't go where you're going. And when you accept that, you stop trying to convince, convert, or carry. You walk lighter, you move faster, you breathe easier. Because the right people will catch up, the right people will align, the right people will recognize the season, and the ones who don't, let them stay where they are. You have places to go. Let me free you from something that has been draining your strength for far too long. Stop explaining yourself to people who don't understand purpose, because explanation assumes openness, and some people are not confused. They are committed to misunderstanding you. They don't want clarity, they want control, they don't want understanding, they want comfort. And the moment your purpose disrupts what they're used to, they stop listening and start resisting. You've been breaking yourself down into smaller sentences so people can digest you. You've been translating your vision into language that fits their fear. You've been justifying obedience to people who never asked you to obey anything higher than convenience. And it's exhausting. Purpose does not argue. Purpose moves. The problem is not that you can't explain it well enough. The problem is that purpose speaks a language only alignment can hear. If someone is not called to your journey, no amount of explanation will make it make sense to them. You're trying to explain elevation to people who are afraid of heights. You're trying to explain discipline to people addicted to comfort. You're trying to explain sacrifice to people who avoid discomfort at all costs. And then you walk away feeling frustrated, misunderstood, and doubting yourself, not because your vision is wrong, but because you took it to the wrong audience. Let me tell you something important. Not everyone gets context. Some people only see the action, not the instruction. They see the move, not the mandate. They see the change, not the calling. So when you explain yourself, they hear rebellion. When you set boundaries, they hear rejection. When you grow, they hear judgment. And instead of moving forward, you find yourself stuck in conversations that lead nowhere, because purpose doesn't need consensus. If everyone understands your vision, it's probably too small. If everyone agrees with your move, it's probably too safe. Purpose often requires decisions that don't make sense to people who are not assigned to the outcome. And here's the dangerous part. The more you explain yourself to the wrong people, the more you dilute your conviction. You start negotiating with doubt. You start editing obedience. You start questioning what you were once certain about, all because you wanted to be understood. But purpose was never designed to be understood by everyone. It was designed to be fulfilled. There is a time to seek counsel. Yes, there is wisdom in accountability. But there is a difference between wise counsel and unqualified opinion. Some people speak loudly about things they've never built, never carried, never survived, and you keep giving weight to voices that have no experience with the weight you're carrying. That stops today. In 2026, your obedience will be louder than your explanations. Your consistency will speak for you. Your discipline will answer questions you never had to respond to. Because explanations are temporary, but results are permanent. You don't need to explain why you're moving differently. You don't need to explain why you're unavailable. You don't need to explain why you're focused, disciplined, or quiet. People who understand purpose will recognize it without a speech. People who don't will never be satisfied, no matter how much you explain. And let me tell you something else. Explanations invite debate. Purpose does not need to be debated. The moment you start explaining, people feel entitled to an opinion. They feel authorized to vote on your direction. They feel comfortable challenging something they were never assigned to lead. That's why silence becomes maturity. Silence says, I'm secure enough to move without approval. Silence says, I trust what I heard. Silence says, I don't need validation to be obedient. And yes, some people will label you distant. Others will call you arrogant. Let them. Misinterpretation is often the cost of clarity. You don't owe access to everyone, especially not to people who only show up to question, not to support. Stop carrying the burden of being understood. Your job is not to convince. Your job is not to defend. Your job is to execute, because at the end of the journey, nobody will ask how well you explained it. They'll look at what you built. They'll look at who you became. They'll look at the fruit, and fruit needs no explanation. So release the pressure to make sense to everyone. Protect your vision, guard your obedience, move with confidence. Purpose doesn't need a press conference, it needs commitment. Let me tell you why moving quiet is not hiding, it's wisdom. Because when you announce everything you're about to do, you invite people into a process they were never assigned to. You invite opinions that don't contribute. You invite pressure that doesn't belong to you. And you invite interference before anything has had time to mature. Move quiet, build loud. Silence during construction is protection. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they exposed their plans too early. They talked while they should have been training. They posted while they should have been preparing. They explained while they should have been executing. And here's the truth. Most people won't tell you not everyone wants you to succeed. Some people just want to know what you're doing. They want updates, not outcomes. They want access, not alignment. They want information, not transformation. When you move quietly, you deny them unnecessary access, because access creates interference. The moment you announce your next move, people feel entitled to comment on it. Some will doubt it. Some will downplay it. Some will secretly compete with it. Some will subtly discourage you under the disguise of being realistic. And now, instead of building, you're managing emotions, theirs and yours. But why? And you move quiet, you stay focused. You stay grounded. You stay free from the burden of expectation. Let me say this clearly, expectation is heavy. When people know what you're working on, they start watching the clock. They start measuring progress. They start asking questions that interrupt your flow. And even when they mean well, their curiosity can become pressure. Quiet movement keeps your momentum clean, because some things need privacy to grow. Athletes train in private so they can perform in public. Architects don't invite opinions while the foundation is still being poured. Builders don't stop every 5 minutes to explain what a beam is supposed to become. They build and then they reveal. Building loud doesn't mean talking loud. It means results speak so clearly that no explanation is required. Results end arguments. Results silence doubters. Results shut down comparison. When you arrive with evidence, nobody asks questions, they ask how. But when you arrive with announcements, people ask why, and why conversations drain energy. Quiet builders understand something powerful. Success doesn't need witnesses during construction. It needs witnesses after completion. Some of you are leaking energy because you keep giving progress reports to people who are not invested in the outcome. You're updating people who won't help you finish. You're sharing plans with people who won't celebrate the result. And every time you do, you give away confidence. Because when people don't see results yet, they judge the vision. They question the pace. They doubt the direction. And if you're not careful, you'll internalize their doubt and start questioning yourself. That's why you move quiet. Not because you're insecure, but because you're intentional. You don't need validation at every step. You don't need applause while you're still learning. You don't need approval while you're still becoming. And here's the part that matters most. Moving quiet keeps you humble. When nobody knows what you're doing, you stay focused on mastery, not image. You work harder because you're not distracted by applause. You stay disciplined because nobody's watching but you. Quiet seasons refine character. They strip ego. They build resilience. They develop consistency. And when you finally show up with results, the confidence is different. It's rooted, not reactive. You don't brag. You don't explain. You don't defend. You simply stand, and people feel it. Let me also say this. Moving quiet protects you from unnecessary competition. When you broadcast your plans, you wake up people who weren't even thinking about you. You turn your lane into a race. You turn your assignment into a comparison. But when you move quietly, you stay in your lane. You don't rush. You don't chase. You don't look left or right. You build at your pace. And when the work is done, when the foundation is solid, when the structure can hold weight, then you let it speak. Not with noise, with impact. Because loud results don't shout. They echo. They echo in rooms you never had access to before. They echo in opportunities you didn't have to ask for. They echo in respect that can't be negotiated. So stop announcing, stop explaining, stop previewing. Move quiet, build intentionally, and let the outcome make the introduction. Because when your work speaks for you, your silence will finally be understood. Let me say something that will save you years of emotional exhaustion if you let it sink in. Your peace is more valuable than their opinion. And the moment you truly understand that, your life begins to change. Because opinions are cheap. Everybody has one. People form them without context, without responsibility, without carrying the weight you carry. They comment from the sidelines while you're in the arena, bleeding, building, surviving. And yet somehow we've been conditioned to treat opinions like currency, to chase them, defend against them, or allow them to dictate how we feel about ourselves. But peace is expensive. Peace costs boundaries. Peace costs saying no. Peace costs disappointing people who were comfortable with you being available, agreeable, and explainable. And that's why so many people don't have it. You've been losing sleep over words spoken by people who won't lose a second of sleep over you. You've been replaying conversations, rereading messages, overthinking tone and intention, while your purpose waits patiently for your attention. Let me tell you the truth. You cannot live a focused life while being emotionally available to everyone's opinion. Every opinion you internalize becomes a weight. Every criticism you entertain becomes a voice. And if you're not careful, those voices get louder than your own. That's when peace starts slipping away. Peace doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes, little by little, comment by comment, expectation by expectation, until one day you wake up tired, irritable, distracted, not because you're doing too much, but because you're carrying too much that was never yours. You were never meant to carry everyone's perception of you. Some people will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you explain. Some people will judge you no matter how kind you are. Some people will criticize you no matter how much you grow. And here's the freeing part. You don't have to correct them. Because peace begins the moment you stop trying to control how you are perceived. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You don't need to be approved by everyone. Approval is not peace. Alignment is when you are aligned with your values, your purpose, and your direction. Peace follows, even when things are hard, even when decisions are uncomfortable, even when people don't agree. But when you live for opinions, peace becomes impossible because opinions shift. Today they applaud you. Tomorrow, question you. Today, they support you. Tomorrow, they resent you. And if your peace depends on something that unstable, you'll never rest. Let me ask you something. How many decisions have you delayed because you were worried about what someone would say? How many boundaries have you avoided setting because you didn't want to seem rude? How many times have you stayed silent when you should have spoken, or spoken when you should have stayed silent? Just to keep the peace, only to lose your own. That's not peace, that's self-betrayal. Real peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from honoring yourself. Sometimes peace looks like distance. Sometimes peace looks like silence. Sometimes peace looks like walking away without closure. And yes, people will talk. Let them. They talked when you were struggling. They talked when you were growing. They talked when you were quiet. They will always talk. The difference is whether you let their talk live rent-free in your spirit. In 2026, peace is not a luxury, it's a requirement. You don't have time to be emotionally drained by people who don't add value to your life. You don't have capacity for constant explanation, defense, and justification. You need clarity, you need focus, you need rest in your spirit. And peace creates space for all three. When you protect your peace, your decisions become clearer, your reactions become calmer, your confidence becomes quieter but stronger. You stop responding out of emotion and start moving with intention. And here's the irony. The moment you stop caring so much about opinions, people start respecting you more, because peace looks like confidence, boundaries look like strength, silence looks like self-control. You don't argue, you don't defend, you don't chase validation, you choose peace. So the next time someone offers an opinion that costs you sleep, ask yourself, is this worth my peace? The next time you feel pressure to explain yourself, ask, is clarity required, or am I just afraid of being misunderstood? The next time you feel the urge to respond emotionally, pause and choose peace instead, because peace will take you places opinions never could. Opinions fade, peace sustains. And the life you're building in silence will require a calm mind, a guarded heart, and a spirit that refuses to be disturbed by noise that doesn't matter. Protect your peace. It's worth more than you think. Let me tell you something that will change how you approach every single day of your life if you truly grasp it. Discipline will take you where motivation never will. Because motivation is emotional. It comes and goes. It rises when things feel good and disappears the moment resistance shows up. Discipline, on the other hand, doesn't care how you feel. It cares about what you committed to. And that's why disciplined people keep moving when motivated people stop. You've been waiting to feel ready. You've been waiting to feel inspired. You've been waiting to feel like it's the right time. But destiny doesn't wait on feelings. Purpose doesn't pause because you're tired. And growth doesn't show up when it's convenient. Discipline shows up anyway. Motivation says I'll do it when I'm excited. Discipline says I'll do it because I said I would. And that difference determines everything. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they rely on motivation to carry responsibilities that require discipline. They start strong, talk big, feel passionate, and then life applies pressure. Energy dips, excitement fades, and without discipline, momentum dies. Discipline is what keeps you moving when no one is clapping, when progress feels slow, when results aren't visible yet. Because discipline understands something motivation never will. Progress is built in repetition. It's the boring days, the quiet mornings, the uncelebrated consistency. That's where lives are changed. Discipline is choosing to wake up early when nobody is watching. Discipline is doing the work when the reward feels far away. Discipline is saying no to short-term comfort so you can say yes to long-term fulfillment. And let me be honest, discipline is uncomfortable. It requires structure. It requires boundaries. It requires saying no to yourself. That's why so many people avoid it, because discipline demands sacrifice before it delivers reward. Motivation promises reward first and disappears when sacrifice is required. But disciplined people understand the exchange. They don't ask, do I feel like it? They ask, what does this season require? They don't wait for the perfect mood. They create habits that carry them through imperfect days, because habits will carry you when feelings fail. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your discipline. That's why two people can have the same dream, the same opportunity, the same resources, and end up in completely different places. One relied on motivation, the other built discipline. Discipline trains your mind to obey your decisions, and that's powerful. Because once your mind learns obedience, excuses lose authority. Procrastination loses control. Fear loses influence. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop arguing with your commitments. You stop breaking promises to your future. And yes, some days you won't want to do it. Some days you'll be tired. Some days you'll feel unmotivated, uninspired, uninterested. Discipline says, do it anyway. Because discipline understands that feelings are temporary, but results are permanent. Every time you show up when you don't feel like it, you strengthen something inside you. You build self-trust. You develop confidence. You prove to yourself that you can be relied on. And that confidence compounds. Motivation will never give you that. Motivation depends on external factors: music, mood, circumstances. Discipline comes from internal alignment. It's rooted in identity. You don't do it because you feel like it. You do it because that's who you are becoming. In 2026, motivation will get you started. Discipline will get you finished, because the finish line belongs to the consistent, not the excited. Let me also say this: discipline protects your future self. Every disciplined decision you make today is a gift to who you will be tomorrow. You're either making life easier for your future or harder. Discipline is choosing pain now so you don't have to choose regret later. And regret is far more painful. When you live disciplined, your life becomes predictable in the best way. Progress becomes inevitable. Growth becomes steady. Results become unavoidable. Not because you're special, not because you're lucky, but because you're consistent. So stop waiting to feel motivated. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop waiting for energy to magically appear. Create structure, build habits, honor commitments. Because discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It asks who, why. Are becoming. And if you stay disciplined long enough, motivation will eventually catch up to your results. But by then you won't need it because discipline already carried you there. Let me speak to the season you've been questioning, the one that feels quiet, heavy, and unfamiliar. Isolation is sometimes preparation. And I know it doesn't feel spiritual. It doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't feel productive. It feels lonely. It feels confusing. It feels like something must be wrong. But hear me, some of the most important work in your life will happen when there is no audience. You didn't lose people because you failed. You didn't become distant because you're broken. You didn't step back because you're weak. You were pulled aside. Because before elevation comes separation. Before public impact comes private refinement. Before your voice gets louder, your character must get stronger. Isolation strips distractions. When the noise fades, you start hearing things you couldn't hear before. Your own thoughts, your own fears, your own patterns. In isolation, excuses lose hiding places. There's no one to blame, no one to perform for, no one to impress, just you and the truth. And that's uncomfortable because isolation doesn't just remove people. It reveals you. It reveals habits you've ignored. It reveals wounds you've covered. It reveals strengths you didn't know you had. That's why so many people run from isolation. They fill the silence with entertainment, noise, and constant connection. Because sitting alone forces you to confront what you've been avoiding. But preparation requires confrontation. You can't lead others if you can't sit with yourself. You can't carry weight if you haven't been strengthened in private. You can't sustain success if you haven't learned discipline without accountability. Isolation is where you build internal stability. When no one is watching, who are you? When no one is clapping, do you still show up? When no one is affirming you, do you still believe? These are the questions. Isolation answers. And let me say this, isolation is not rejection, it's redirection. You weren't pushed out, you were set apart. Some people were removed not because they were bad, but because they were distracting. They would have kept you comfortable when comfort was the enemy. Comfort delays growth, isolation forces focus. It forces you to develop skills instead of socializing away your time. It forces you to strengthen your mind instead of leaning on validation. It forces you to define your values instead of borrowing them from the room you're in. That's why isolation often feels like pressure. Pressure reveals capacity. Diamonds are not formed in crowds. They're formed under pressure, in darkness, over time. And yes, there will be moments when you question yourself, moments when you wonder if you've been forgotten, moments when you miss old connections, but don't confuse missing people with needing tea. Some people were good company, not good contributors. Isolation teaches you the difference. It teaches you how to self-regulate emotions, how to create routines, how to lead yourself when no one is giving direction, how to make decisions without consensus. And when you come out of isolation, you come out different, not louder, clearer, not desperate, grounded, not needy, confident, because you're no longer dependent on external affirmation. Isolation matures you. It removes the need to prove yourself. It removes the fear of being misunderstood. It removes the habit of over-explaining. You become comfortable with silence because you've learned that silence doesn't mean emptiness. It means focus. And here's the part most people miss. Isolation has an expiration date. It is not permanent. It is purposeful. You are not meant to stay hidden forever, but you are meant to be prepared before you are revealed. If you skip isolation, you may still rise, but you won't last. You'll crumble under pressure. You'll react instead of respond. You'll chase approval instead of leading with conviction. Isolation builds endurance. So if you're in a season where your circle is smaller, your phone is quieter, and your path feels solitary, don't panic. Lean in, use this time, build discipline, sharpen vision, heal wounds, strengthen character. Because when preparation is complete, connection will return, but different. The conversations will be deeper. The alignment will be stronger. The relationships will be healthier. And you'll realize something powerful. The isolation didn't break you, it built you.